All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Traffic Corner Tuesday. My name is Nancy Crow, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for SPAC Consulting, and I'll be your host for today's session. I want to thank everybody for coming to today's session. It's the last one of the year, and I want to remind everybody of a few housekeeping rules on this last session of the year. If you would, please mute your mics. I'm hearing a little feedback from a few people on the line, but if you mute your mic, we can cut out some of that noise and everyone will be able to hear our presenters clearly today. Also, please spend some time thinking of questions for our presenters. Both Mike and Bryant have spent a lot of time doing trip generation, and we have built our own trip generation data sets, so they are quite experienced in this area and would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Just type them in the chat box on the side. All right, moving on. Just a second. Okay, so SPAC Enterprise is our host today. SPAC Enterprise is made up of a series of companies that are all related to traffic engineering. We have companies that are doing traffic study and consulting services. That's our SPAC consulting arm of our business. We do have traffic data collection products that are sold through our Counting Cars arm. And we also do free trip generation data, which we're going to be speaking about extensively in today's presentation. You can learn more about all of our companies on Mike on Traffic, where we do have a page dedicated to each of the businesses and what they do. For today's session, the topic is ITE Trip Generation Manual, the 10th edition. We're excited to share that again because this is an area where we have a lot of expertise. Looking ahead into 2018, we do have 2 new sessions coming up, one in January on numbers every traffic engineer should know. It's kind of a must attend seminar or webinar rather for any of our traffic engineers. And in February, we'll be moving on to right turns and on red research. This is primary research that the SPAC consulting team has been working on for several months, and we're excited to share our results with our readers and followers. If you stay tuned to the end of our presentation today, we will tell you how you can get a copy of our free trip generation spreadsheet. Mike is going to share more about that throughout the presentation. So stay tuned to the end of the presentation for how to get that particular spreadsheet. And then finally, I want to move on to introducing our presenters for today. Mike SPAC is the president of SPAC Consulting, and he is the recognized authority on traffic studies. He is a graduate of the University of Minnesota. He is also the past president of the North Central section of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and he is a fellow of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Since 1996, Mike has led over 1,000 traffic engineering projects, and during the past 2 decades, Mike has founded 4 companies, including SPAC Consulting. He is also the creative force and principal writer of the industry-leading blog, Mike on Traffic. Also joining me today is Bryant Fiesick. He is the Vice President of SPAC Consulting, and he is also widely known in the transportation industry, having managed more than 700 traffic engineering projects. He is also a graduate of the University of Minnesota, and he is an expert in Synchro, SimTraffic, Vistro, vSim, and a variety of other traffic modeling software. Bryant is also a regular contributor to the Mike on Traffic blog, and we are lucky to have both of them here today. So please join me in welcoming both Mike SPAC and Bryant Fiesick.
Thanks, Nancy. Mike here.
And Bryant here. Yeah, thanks, Nancy.
Bryant's got a cold, so I'm trying to stay far away from him, but
it's okay. I won't breathe into the mic. You should be safe on everyone else's end.
So today we're going to talk about trip generation and focus on ITE's 10th edition, which came out a few months ago, and we've been hashing out a lot of detail and using it over those last few months. Today we're going to cover 3 topics. We're going to give you a little bit of an overview. We're also going to talk about big changes from the 9th to the 10th edition, and then we're going to show you the ITE's online trip generation tool. But before we get to that, I am going to apologize because we've put together a PowerPoint that isn't exactly our style. A lot of numbers, a lot of text. Typically, we prefer more of the case studies with pictures and that kind
Yep.
of stuff. But
Yep.
today's topic doesn't lend itself very well to that. But to that end, if you sign up to get the trip generation at the end, we're going to send out a PDF of the PowerPoint so you
Yep.
can have all that data that we're going to share with you today.
I think I'll add on this too that if you are a member of ITE or if you're not, they recently in their last journal had an article about trip generation, had a nice overview, gave some history, and provided some things that you'll see in this one too. We go into a little bit deeper detail than some other things, but at any rate, but yeah, so just a quick shout out to ITE and their journal and approaching this as well and just trying to get that information out. Check them out as well for some more details.
Okay, so the overview. One big change, huge change, is the trip generation manual has blossomed from about 2,000 pages in the 9th edition to about 3,000 pages now. So there's been a lot of data added and a lot of land uses and a lot of different subsets that we're going to talk about today.
The second one is just going from 9 to 10, and we've got it on there. It's apples to oranges. So as when we went from 8 to 9, we would characterize that as more. It was an update of some of the rates, but that was it. All the land uses stayed roughly the same. There were a few added, but the whole presentation was very similar. Now as we move into 10, this has been completely restructured, and just the way they're slicing and dicing the data is different. So and Mike did most of the work trying to compare the two. Just as he dove into it, just trying to make some of those comparisons was very difficult.
Yeah. So I think the starting point for this is we love the tweaks, the improvements. They're not tweaks. The improvements ITE has made to the trip generation structure, but there are some limitations with the data, and this is right out of the 3rd generation handbook that accompanied the 10th edition manual, getting into kind of the limitations of when this data is relevant, when it's not. So kind of when we're doing our traffic forecasts. The first one is, and these are all intuitive for us engineers, but the first one is make sure the size of your use is within the range of the data. So if you're looking at an office building and we have data from office buildings from 10,000 to 200,000 square feet, and all of a sudden you have a 2 million square foot office park, I'm being exaggerating a little bit, but don't expect that those rates are going to apply when you're outside of the range.
Next one is just with the fitted curve, and the fitted curve is not, or the fitted equation is not provided on all the land uses, but it is provided on some. But in order to use that equation, you need that R squared value to be above 0.75, and there should be more than 20 data points. So this is just as you're looking at the data, how much do we put into that? So this gets more into the statistics of everything, but it's really, you need a lot of data to be statistically valid and then to use that fitted equation.
So next up, the standard deviation on that average rate, if you're going to use the average rate, should be less than 55%. Unfortunately, none of the data sets, they give the standard deviation of the rate, but they don't give the percentage. So this is a piece of math you have to do. Of course, you can eyeball it to make sure it's half or less, but none of the data sets give this for you.
Last one is just if you have less than 6 data points, excuse me, to use supplemental. And this is something we really take to heart, is looking at that local data and saying that either it's not there in the manual or you need more to really beef up the trip generation that you're looking at.
Yeah, and this led us, I think we submitted about 8,000 hours of data to ITE at that time of publication. We've collected more. We have more than 10,000 hours in our tripgeneration.org data set that we're happy to share with anyone. And this is because we keep bumping into the limited data points in the trip generation manual.
And right along with that, too, something we tout about local data is that there are differences between the different regions. And the one we point out because it was very clear is with student housing. And if we looked at the ITE rate, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was one number. If we looked at rates in Florida, where we did some comparison and we exchanged some trip generation back and forth, their student housing rates were way higher than ITE because everybody drove. Parking was freely available. It's just what they did. When we compared it to the Minnesota rates, ours was way below ITE because most people walked around the student housing
there
here.
just isn't
So
public parking available for students
right.
on the campuses here in Minnesota.
So that's just another point about how local data, it can be a great thing to capture your specific areas, driving habits, and other characteristics of the region.
So, and lastly, this kind of ties into the first one, but the handbook talks about make sure your values are kind of within the cluster of the data points on the graphs. So we're going to keep moving. We got a lot of material to get through. So we'll start in on some of the big changes.
So first one is person trips. So everything before has been in vehicle trips. This is obviously, that's what we had typically looked at. Now, as we are moving more towards multimodal, taking reductions for transit, that sort of thing, IT has taken the step towards looking at person trips. What are the actual number of people going in and out of each land use?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is very costly data to collect, very time-consuming data. So we've dabbled with this, but it's very expensive on a voluntary effort. We are hoping ITE, NCHRP, universities, we hope this becomes a big area of research just because it's going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars to get at this, not the...
Or if we're wrong and this is easy and somebody has figured this out, please let us know and we'll start doing it.
Yes, we've posted to the IT community multiple times trying to figure out, are we doing something wrong with our process? Another big change is they've added a location setting as one of the filters. So now we can look at center city core, dense multi-use urban, general urban or suburban where we don't know, or kind of a mix, or rural. And this is awesome because we've done traffic studies for Walmart in a smaller town where to get the trip generation that is expected, nearly everyone in town would need to show up on a daily basis. And obviously that's just not going to happen. So kind of center city versus these different categories can make a huge difference.
Yeah, this is, I echo that. This is just a great change.
So three big changes to specific land uses and kind of fleshing out and reworking the descriptions, reworking the codes. The first one being the high cube warehouse distribution centers. These are the big Amazon ginormous facility type things that are obviously popping up around the country.
Next one is apartments, and this is where we've gone into, or IT has gone into more slicing. Is it a low level, mid level, and then along with the location types, you can really start to drill down as a high 10 or more floor apartment building in an urban core. So again, combined, the two are great for this land use, but it's completely different than what was in the 9th edition.
Yeah, but some of the slicing and dicing previous between apartments, owner occupied, townhouses, a lot of that's been consolidated down into just a multifamily unit based on units. And then lastly is the gas stations have been reworked quite a bit. Some deleted, some added, kind of refactoring. And there were some anomalies in the last data set that weren't intuitive, like a gas station with a car wash generating less traffic than a same gas station without a car wash. Some things have been cleaned up there. Okay, we're not going to read off the big list here, but 22 new land uses were added.
And I think the big thing pulled out of this is that they're getting very specific. So we had our broad categories before of office or a general retail, that sort of thing. Now we're starting to get into some very specific ones, like the small office building or a school district office. So we're starting to drill down to get very, like I said, very specific into the land use you're looking for.
And a handful of land uses were deleted, like the beloved DVD video rental store.
Yeah, it could make a comeback, but
interestingly, we did a traffic study this year for a zoo. I guess we're going to have to go back to historical data or try to collect our own trip generation.
To be fair, I think the 9th edition only had like one study in there, so it's not like they had a robust amount of information on the zoo.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to drill into the data for a few minutes, and we're not going to read everything off, and I'm not going to promise that this is 100% accurate, because wading through this data and trying to get apples to apples comparisons, we've spent a lot of intern time trying on this. So the top 10 changes of rates on a daily basis, see up there, coffee shop with a drive-through only. To be fair, that's about a 10% change though, because these are little 500 square foot pods that are generating thousands of trips a day.
Yep.
Maybe that's a business indicator for any entrepreneurs out there. But down to, we'll see a theme here. Some schools seem to be generating more traffic, and that's what we're seeing with our work. There's a lot more pickups and drop-offs. Some of the things that are going down, movie theaters, the small convenience markets with a couple of gas pumps. These are all drive-in banks. They're kind of, the uses that are decreasing seem intuitive to us.
Yep, I agree with that. This turns toward the AM peak hours, so we just tried to slice it a little bit differently. And for that AM peak of adjacent street traffic, these are the changes. The coffee shop's up there again. So apparently we really like coffee. Gas station, you can see the list there. But again, the schools pop up. So gets back to our thought that there's a lot more drop-off and pickups now than there used to be.
And let me flip to the next one. Okay, decreased fast food without a drive-through lane. There are just less of those. In the AM, some of the coffee shop types are actually going down in the AM, but we're seeing increased in the PM. Things like the drive-in bank. So nothing crazy in here.
Same thing with the PM. Again, you can see just the list. We got a bunch that go up, and then similarly on the next one, just down. The main thing is that there's a lot of changes in here, and unfortunately, as we pulled these lists together, we thought we might see a trend or something consistent along them, but we didn't. It's basically, as more data has been added, it made changes, and that's probably the biggest thing, is that it's like we said at the beginning, this is a fundamental change from the 9th edition, and your rates have changed more than likely.
Yes.
More data has been added, and you have changes to what you used before.
Yeah, at this point, I think it's fair to say if I was reviewing a traffic study that used the 9th edition to do its forecasting, I would say it's invalid at this point.
Yeah, yep. One thing we didn't mention on there too, with all the different changes, is ITE took out the data from the 60s and 70s. So we're only using 80s and above. So
yes.
That's a slight improvement from our view. Talking with them, they have said they didn't notice that much of a change in the rates once they took out the 60s and 70s. I think if we took out the 80s, 90s, I think we might see even more changes, but yes. That's something we can keep working with them on, and hopefully make some changes there too.
Okay. So this is getting into the online system. I'm not seeing the scroll bar on the bottom here, Bryant. So wanted to point out, we don't have a ton of time left, but kind of point out a few highlights here of ITE's online system. They also have the book.
Maximized.
Yep. They also have the book and the PDF to also be used. But so you log in to the website here and pick. Right now it's just the 10th edition. We put in a general office building, this being one of the more robust sites. Drill down, what's your variable? We're looking at the AM here. We're in the general urban and put in our value here. It tells us the data range and hit calculate and tells us based on whether we're on the average using the rates or whether we're using the equation, how much trips, and there's supposed to be a bar on the right. And
That's what happened.
Okay, our session timed out. Hopefully get back to the world here.
So as Mike's pulling that up, I'll look at one of the questions we have. ITE removed the specialty retail center. That is correct. And he asks, what is the code or use recommended for generic retail? So we've had this come up a couple times in our studies now, and unfortunately, I don't know that I have a full answer. We have fallen back on the shopping center and used that, but we've also tried to find more information about it. Do they have an expectation of what that store might be? Is it, can we get it to a restaurant use or something like that? Can they be more specific?
Yeah, if it's generic, we in a
shopping center.
Yep, we default back to the shopping center.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's the one we would have to use now.
Okay, so little technical glitch, but we're back live here. So you can kind of drill down into the different categories, and then over here it gives the data statistics. So on this one, we can see number of studies, 66. It does have a fitted equation with an R squared of 0.83. So this is valid. We could use the equation on this one. Also let's see, the average rate 9.74 and the standard deviation being 5.15. So that is, by my brain, really close to the 55% cutoff of when you should or should not use that. So I'm going to drill over here to maybe one of these other data sets that isn't so robust. Our commercial airport with one data point, and this is definitely the area where if your data range is exactly 3,100 employees, you can use this data set. Yes, I appreciate that ITE is giving us this data point, but this is one of those, if you're doing a traffic study for this land use, the only credible way to do it is to go out there and collect your own data.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a snapshot of quickly how the site works. Otis from Transoft. We do not use Otis. We've built our own spreadsheets over time. We don't anticipate switching to Otis, but we're hoping that this layout here and what ITE is doing, we love the changes ITE has made. So I want to put that as the starting point. Yep, we love this. But if this is where ITE stops, I'm probably going to give them a C-. Things like, well, they're not giving us, if we go back to something with a little more robust data set. So just to drill down here, and let's call it 50. They're not giving us the calculated trip ends by direction. And obviously it doesn't matter on the AGT basis, but the AM and PM is not 50-50. So you have to do those calculations. They're not incorporating the pass-by reductions in this. They're not incorporating the new internal reduction methodology in this. They're not allowing you to build a data table with multiple uses, let alone if you go in here and you pick a different time period, it resets and you have to put back in your number. To me, I would, as long as we're staying within the same land use, it would be nice to put that in. I know Otis has some of these features, but the last time we looked at it, it wasn't where we wanted it to be either. But we're paying significantly for ITE on this, and we would appreciate ITE bringing this forward and not depending on Transoft.
And that's where I think, as Mike said, where we'd like to go is that this is a great first step, and we hope it is a first step, and we want to keep working with ITE because we've got a dozen different ideas of what they could put into this, which is going to take some time and effort, obviously. So we're happy to keep working with them and keep providing our data. And hopefully, if we do this webinar again next year, there's been even more improvements and we can say, wow, what a great use. One of the questions we had that came in was whether the plots on the online can, whether you can put the daily and the AM and the PM, put them all together.
Yep.
Scroll up there. I think that was a question.
Yep. So before we get through
one-page report.
Yeah, so why don't we get through, before we dive into all the questions, why don't we just wrap up the portion here of, that was our very quick dog and pony show. And we can answer questions offline too. But also we're working with John. God, I don't know that I asked John how to pronounce his last name. Kostianiak.
That's as good as I'm going to get.
Yeah, we've been working a lot with John at Trip Chain, a new concept he's bringing forward, and he's talked about that at the ITE annual meeting. And we're collaborating with him. In addition to ITE, he wants to bring blockchain technology. So this is open, free, very filterable, and we love that idea. So questions, comments, keep coming them in. Keep sending them to the chat. We'll answer those. We'll stay on the line with everyone. But as we bump up against 1 o'clock, the free data as well as the PDF of these slides, you can text 44222 with the word TripGen. Of course, data rates apply, and you'll get shot these files, or you can just email Nancy here at ncrow@spacconsulting.com. And then lastly, I'll say we'll be back January 16th, and we have a bunch of numbers. We think every traffic engineer, whether you have them memorized or at your fingertips, but we have about 9 categories of numbers we like to have handy to answer architects and city engineers questions, and especially when we're in a public hearing.
Exactly.
So there you go.
Right. So that, like Mike said, that wraps up. We're going to hit the questions now. We're going to try to we'll just continue to answer them as they come in. So feel free to keep asking. We'll keep answering. So where I left off was for the online, is there a way to get a one-page report with AM, PM, and daily estimates? And unfortunately, no. That is one of the changes we'd like to see is whether it's putting all those together for a single land use or putting multiple land uses together. That would be a good change because as it is, you have to print a one-page report for each land use and each time frame, and that gets to be a lot of pages in addition to the time it takes you. So,
yep. Brian asks about registering for January, February. You should get follow-up emails. If you got the link for this first one, today's, you'll get follow-up emails for all the webinars we're doing. If you're concerned about that, feel free to email Nancy, ncrow@spacconsulting.com. They're at the bottom, and she will definitely get you signed up.
You can also check out Mike on Traffic, and we'll have our ads for the webinars. And
yep,
you can always link through there too.
You can link on, and once you sign up for a webinar, you'll be on our email series to get the blasts of upcoming topics.
Mm-hmm.
What software do you recommend to use? I assume you're talking specifically about trip generation. So for that, we actually use spreadsheets we have put together. We are debating whether we're going to do that moving forward, but our spreadsheets have the pass-by rates in them and do the directional distribution. So that's kind of the next two steps. If ITE would incorporate those things, that would probably cause us to stop using our own spreadsheets. And I used to share that spreadsheet, but ITE sent me a letter saying we were infringing their copyright, so I stopped doing that. Maybe ITE will reverse that stance and we can start sharing that spreadsheet again. We dabbled with Otis, but Otis didn't go far enough in creating the reports we liked, and we didn't. It rubs us the wrong way that we are submitting. We've spent $100,000 collecting the trip generation data we've collected. We send it freely to ITE to further the industry, to circle back and to pay annually somebody else for them to sell us back our data. That just rubs us the wrong way. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but
and I will say from ITE, as a thanks for the data we provided, they did give us the new trip generation manual for free. So
yes,
there was a return on our investment there. But like Mike said, paying another third party for using our data, we're not there yet. We don't see the benefit of it.
Okay. The same for all day. Code 938. Is
that the one we were?
Square foot as the variable, but this square foot is the same for all data points. That doesn't seem like you can get a correlation if the data variable doesn't change.
So I don't know which land use this is, but it sounds like there may only be one or maybe two studies, and so I would agree with that. I mean, if your data comes from
a single point,
or 2 points from the same basis, you collected data for 2 days. It's really hard to get an equation out of that.
To extrapolate that forward.
Yeah, so it's just you need more data, and that's why I would go back to saying you need that local to add that in and build up the database. Oh,
John chimed in and put a link to tripchain.org. I encourage everyone to check that out. And John, next time we talk, I will get the pronunciation of your last name, so sorry about that. Let's see, Mark Clark asks, are you all aware of any studies on the traffic impacts of dual drive-through lanes for fast food restaurants? And I don't believe... We've collected a lot of data on fast food and even collected queuing data that we have out on the blog, but I don't think we distinguished between how many drive-through lanes. And I think that's a very interesting point. About 10 years ago, we did a lot of trip generation work here in Minnesota when CVS came to town, and they proposed 2 drive-through lanes. And most of the Walgreens here were single drive-through lanes, and we did see about a 50% bump in trip generation rates between single drive-through lanes and 2 drive-through lanes at a pharmacy. So that's an interesting question and probably one of those things that should be drilled into, Mark. What about trip gen software by Trafficware? I don't think I've looked at.
I have a little bit. That's in Synchro SimTraffic. And it's all based on the ITE data. So it is I haven't used it much, but it's a good source. It's a good way to look at it, but you miss things with that. It doesn't have the description of the land uses, so you can't make sure you're getting the right one. And it doesn't, I don't think it contains all the data. I haven't looked at their latest version of it, but I would say if that's what you've got, it's better than nothing, but getting the ITE version is still the main source and what should be looked at.
Okay. Mitch asked, does the 10th edition include person trips, or is that aspirational? It does include person trips.
For selected land use.
For some land uses, and a lot of those data sets are not very robust. So they're in there, and there is data. When it's included, there is data, but it is very early in the process of collecting person trips.
I think we missed one up there.
Okay, use of gas station convenience store versus convenience store with gas pumps. When to use which one? And um, wow.
Well, this gets, and I don't have the IT descriptions in front of me, but the way I differentiate between them is you kind of look at the main purpose of them. I would view a convenience store with gas pumps as you have a store, might be slightly bigger, but it's only got a couple pumps. I mean, it's an add-on to the store. It's not the main thing. They just happen to have something there. Whereas the gas station convenience store, those would be your typical ones where they've got 16 to 20 fueling positions, and then they're expecting you to get gas and they're hoping you come in and buy stuff
Yes.
as well.
Yep, which is all of the modern gas stations we see go in now.
Yeah. Yeah, the convenience store with gas pump, that's more of a legacy from the mom and pop stores.
Okay, one more question, then I think we're going to wrap up unless we see some more come in. Does the 10th edition offer any estimate or ranges for converting vehicle trips to person trips, or for ranges trip lengths by land use? No, it's my understanding it doesn't. Of course, you could go through and go with each land use type and kind of drill down to your period and your setting and your variable and compare the two, but they don't give any broad sweeping.
They do have, the handbook does have some limited information, some guidance to try to help you, but again, this is all very preliminary. So I would view this as ITEs, this is the direction they want to go, is person trips, because that allows us to then go into any land use and say we expect 60% autos, 20% transit, 20% bike, whatever those percentages are. But we don't have enough data yet. So what they're offering is very preliminary and just it's again a step in the right direction that we hope will get more robust in the future.
Okay. With that, thank you, everyone. Ran over a few minutes. Thanks for staying with us. And yeah, send in text or email to Nancy to get our slides, and also have a great holiday season, Christmas,
Yeah, definitely.
Hanukkah, and look forward to seeing you next year.
Yeah, thank you very much.